crazy. It usually happens that way.
Yeah.
All right. I think that should get it.
Oh, okay, so you set it up?
I'll take some of mine back now.
So Ruby.
He's not gonna stay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Rudy was on the set of her panel.
Hey, Tara. Good, thanks for coming. How official do you have that PowerPoint?
No, I don't know if I changed it.
Kristen, you made the PowerPoint?
No, I just did a full slide. It just a full slide on it.
Well, I want to welcome you guys to our Asian Community Voices panel. We're going to be talking about Asian engagement and how important it is to engage the Asian community, especially this cycle coming off of the wins that we had last cycle. I'm your moderator for this panel today. I'm Swati Singh. I am the Regional Political Director for the Republican National Committee. I manage the Western States. And last cycle, I was the National Strategic Initiatives Director for the Republican National Committee, and I worked on coalitions nationally. And I'm very proud of the work that we did. We saw gains within the minority communities, and so we're going to talk about how we can continue doing that work here today. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to our Vice Chair, Peter Kuo, to introduce himself and have the panelists introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Peter Kuo. 大家好，我的名字是郭宗正 and I speak about 3 languages perfectly, and the 4th one kind of not too well. My wife is from Indonesia, so I kind of understand and speak a little bit of Indonesian. On top of that, Mandarin and Taiwanese, of course. And so we're very, very good, glad to be here today, simply because I really think the Asian demographic voters is going to be our next biggest target for our state of California. Again, California being the most diverse state in the union, I really think we need to tap into this untapped market of voters whose value are exactly that of Republicans: small government, freedom, low taxes. So and the freedom of education as well. So. We will expand on those topics when we go into the deep dive here later. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Marc Ang, local Southern California community organizer. That's what I've been doing for years, building communities and coalitions. Beyond all the biography stuff, which you can read over here, I thank the CAGOP for seeing the importance of reaching out to Asian voters. But I also, on the same token, am very concerned because we should have this demographic locked up. And instead we're sitting here talking about why we need to get to Asian voters, which are naturally aligned with us, but we're losing them by huge margins. We're actually doing better with Hispanics than we are with Asians, which is a real problem. So I'm excited to get to the discussion.
I'm Jeff White. I'm come to the new immigrant, first generations. I'm come to this country in 1984. I've never dreamed I will be here. And first of all, I just want to live in out of a country, the China, and get a freedom. And after I come to this country, I'm working very hard, and I kind of fulfill my American dream. I'm come here with $40. I'm working so hard and raising family. So then, after this, when I'm looking for the California and looking for everything like educations and like the dominated by the Democrat today, I think I should come to do some things. That's why in 2016, I'm come to run for the city council, the school board, and then I get more involved. So, and I just think the lots of immigrants and just like me, we only want to change life. We will never think about the political system. Besides, we never understand because we come from a different system. So I think technically we are very conservative for the first generations. We need to have working so hard and to get them to support the Republicans. Yeah.
All right, so let's start our discussion on how we can better engage the APA community. So I want to ask you guys, what can the party do better? What can California Republicans do better to engage these APA communities?
All right. I really think the number one thing we need to do, again, is very simple. 2 words: show up. And I have told this to many, many people who are trying to engage the Asian American community. Again, Asians, in terms of demographic, is about 15% of the population here in California. And Democrat started this game 30 years ago. And they realized that people are fiercely tribal. So they would go to a, say, a Taiwanese event and start placing candidates amongst and campaign among the Taiwanese people. And even people from Shanghai, they have divided the Asian community into a very, very thin slice of pies, almost 37 of them. Into different demographic, and they would send someone from that region, particularly again Korean, Japanese. They would really micro-target that particular ethnic group. And right now we're still stuck in this Asian thing, but I really think that we need to show up to those micro-target events by having someone who speak their language that look like them. If nothing else, at least understand where they're coming from.
Actually, I want to disagree with that. I think that a lot of the second generation Asian Americans are one monolithic block. That's why the Democrats have been very effective in getting them, because honestly, if you look at it, most of my peers I'm in my 30s, most people in their 30s, 20s, 30s are dating amongst each other. So you have Korean Chinese marriages, you have all different ethnicities coming together, and that is what Obama years have taught us. And honestly, there's a lot of intermarriage with blacks and Latinos as well. So the message has to be universal, and I was really impressed with the Black panel this morning that Corinne and Jennifer were on. Jennifer, by the way, is my podcast partner. We have a podcast called Red Beans and Fried Rice, and it's about the Black and the Asian communities coming together, and we have very honest discussions about modern day race relations. And I think the whole thing of micro-targeting, which the GOP has been doing for a long time to very poor results, actually comes off to the average voter as pandering, and it needs to stop. We need to actually look at everyone about what we have in common, because there's a hunger in the second generation to assimilate, to become working together with all different races. After all, we're in America, not like a sub-colony of Taiwan or Vietnam or China. We are American at the end of the day, and that unifying message is getting lost from all the pandering. So we need the unified message and to talk about the issues that matter to all of us, especially now. This recall election was such a missed opportunity because we spent all our time, first of all, bickering amongst ourselves and not uniting on the question of yes, or we could even have worked with Democrats like Kevin Paffrith to actually get the yes question over the hump. Instead, we were fighting with each other on what candidate to support on the losing Titanic that was going to sink down to 35% or so of the vote. So there's some serious things that need to be done, and the CAGOP and many local GOPs have frankly been embarrassing in their efforts or their lack of efforts.
Okay, I'm just talking to my personal experience. And number one, I was asked one single question for the CAGOP, and get the translations in the forms and the two Chinese communities. I asked the question that you ask yourself, which party you belong to? Are you belong to the Democrat or Republican? And those questions I saw the English version. I said, is there any way we can do in the Chinese version? The reason I asked this one, and the majority of the Chinese that come to the American after the 90s, and from mainland China, we experienced the communist country. And lots of people coming here is looking for the freedom, for the democracy. And the democracy and the democrat, in translation in Chinese, is the same words. And the people is really misleading. We're looking for democracy and we should join the Democrat Party. This big misleading. So, and I think with CAGOP, we should do something to tell the people, no, that's different. And we keep tell the story. This is number one. The number two, for the Asian, lots of people, Chinese, especially new immigrants, lots of people even not registered at the vote, they are citizens, but they even not registered. Or if registered, they even not vote. They do not know their political view. And we do not have a good resource to tell them what's going on the state level, the local level. We should let them to know. In this case, and instead, we should ask the central committees and do more job, reach out. I'm in the central committee member, so I will tell them, say, we should have a republic with yourself as example. We need an Asian republic in each county. And we need to promote them, let them get involved. Then gradually, we want a Republican on each street. People will see who we are. And in this case, and they will understand us. And in this case, we need to invest more. And so 2020, and for the elections, on the Assembly District 20 and 25, I invited many Asians to run for the Central Committee. And we succeeded. And also in certain areas, we never have the Asian representative in the Central Committee. I would encourage you guys, and it's possible, and we can promote the people that alternate members. In this case, they get more and more involved. So when you guys run the elections, we have volunteers. Thank you.
Can I piggyback off that? Thank you. Jeff is a doer. I really like this guy because he's actually out there running for office, getting stuff done. The GOP in general has this lethargic nature to it where they want to sit around and complain about problems, but actually do nothing about it. And it is frankly tiring because, you know, there's people like Rachel Gunther, Cynthia Thacker there that we do stuff in the community and get stuff done and actually get known, because the issue is kind of like what Jeff said is there's this party and there's a lot of Asians that go in and want to be all like, oh, I'm taking pictures and selfies and this and that, but not actually doing the work of organizing events, of bringing the neighborhoods together and actually showing to the voters, oh, we're human. Because the Democrats then take that and say that, oh, you know, we have cold, evil, unfeeling, and we don't understand them. And it's terrible that, you know, they think that way, but we really need to counter that with actions.
So I think we touched on a couple of key topics here. So I want to jump into, and Mark, you brought this up, the difference between tailoring our messages to the first generation and second generation community members. And so I know you touched on that, but Peter, I wanted to hear your thoughts because I know, you know, I also fall in where, you know, we're trying to assimilate in the younger generation, but in the older generation, it is important for us to have a presence and show up in community. So I just wanted you to deep dive a little bit more into that, guys.
Certainly. Again, I agree with many things that Mark has said. Can you hear me okay? So I agree a lot with a lot of things that Marc had mentioned. Again, there is a generation gap. I'm in my 50s, he's in his 30s. And you know, my experience as immigrant 40 years ago when I came to this country was that whoever came to our community first, that is the person we attach our political party to. And Democrat, again, they started this game 30, 40 years ago. They approach all the communities. If there's an issue, maybe have nothing to do with politics, perhaps it's something to do with immigration status. The Democrat congressman is always there. The Democrat assemblyman is always there at these community events. And that's how they engage the Asian American community. It's perhaps different at Marc's generation right now. Everything on social media, on radio stations, TikTok, that I don't even know where they are. So honestly, I felt that I do have lost touch with the younger generation, including my kids. I mean, when I talk about things, what happened to my family, 40 years ago when the big government came over and took everything from us because we don't agree with the government's ideas. The government came along and took everything away from us. So that suffrage of my parents, who lost everything and had to become a dishwasher in the restaurants, is still fresh in my mind. And me being the most spoiled kid in the city of Kaohsiung, I came here as a busboy. So those are the things that I vividly remembered, and I'm trying to tell the stories to the next generation so they can understand what we have gone through. And again, I think the voters who are in the 20s and 30s, who have immigrant parents, perhaps don't quite understand what we have gone through. And that's why I'm trying very hard to explain to them, or to anyone here in this room, is that freedom is, what we're seeing today is exactly what's going on in Taiwan, China, Vietnam 30, 40 years ago. And if we don't recognize that tactic they're using, whatever we do, it's going to be counterproductive.
So the fall of Saigon was 1975. That is 46 years ago now. It's amazing that if you look at the same demographics of those who were born here in the Vietnamese American community are overwhelmingly Democrat, and the ones that are older than that, kind of like Peter said, are overwhelmingly Republican. There's a clear generation gap. Nowhere is it more evident than Orange County. Orange County is ground zero for affluenza, because that is the problem. They had not felt what Peter had felt, which was losing everything because of communism and then having to come here and rebuild. That is completely foreign. They have been completely comfortable, this young generation, and that is kind of the core of the issue, because the GOP isn't even showing up to the debate. That is the problem. So you talk about, okay, reaching those people. What is the obvious thing to do if you want to become the first political party to reach a recent, fresh off the boat immigrant? Show up at the freaking naturalization ceremonies. But guess what? We can't even staff that. I know Cynthia's tried that, and Rachel, they've tried.
4 years.
Yes. You can't even get people to show up there, because Republicans would rather sit at home and be keyboard warriors and talk about how terrible illegal immigration is, and there is a lot of good points there, but the problem is we come off so tone deaf. I really like the black panel today because they address that. They may be wrong. We know they're wrong, but we need to be good teachers and guide them to the light. And it's annoying and it's frustrating, but you don't expect a baby that just came into the world to know times tables, for example. You sit there and you do rote exercises and keep waking them up and keep teaching them until they learn. We are not even showing up to teach them. That is the problem. And that is a structural problem. There's not enough action, too much talk.
For me,
They can do it.
okay, for me, I think let me say this way, the lots of things that we need to really thinking and study the issue. And well, and I want to try to read lots of books to understand the politicians. I see that Americans have lots of books say woman problem, African American problem. I never see any professor writing Asian problem. That's a big problem. Because now we see the problem, how to find a solution. Yeah, so I really like, and we have some things needed to do. And for example, I mean, what I try to do this as the person with powers very limited. So, and 4 years ago, and Helen and me, and we try to getting all the Asians together. We try to form a pact called the Asian American Pacific Islander Republic Alliance. As a pact, I submit a paper to the Secretary of State. 3 years, I keep calling them, they will not approve. So what I did, I talked to the consulate attorney. We changed the name. Instead, the Republican Alliance, we changed the Traditional Alliance. 2 months later, everything approved, pact approved, get all the information. So then I go to the court to change the name to the Republic. Okay, so that's just before the quarantine, the 2020s, and yes, and well, I see that so many people from different races, from different countries, and well, I was thinking you guys are serious and care about the Asian issues, and maybe you can talk to me. I will give you the contact information. What we want, just like Asian Republicans and Alliance, just like the CRAs, and we will promote and register. We will from the volunteer. We want more and more Asian to involve the politicians and understand the Republican. So what has happened, and okay, we have all the informations. Yeah. Okay, I'm talking. I talk something later. Yeah.
We hit on some key issues: anti-socialism, anti-communism. That's a key value with the Republican Party, and that's something that resonates well with the community and those that have experienced that or understand it. What are some other critical issues in the APA community that align with Republican values?
Well, the first and foremost issues that's facing the Asian American is one, again, in my opinion, education. Yeah. And this morning I was at the Inland Empire's meeting, and they talked about the CTAs, how we can use the school issues, education issues to bring voters, because that is not just Asian Americans, that's actually Latinos, African American, and everyone's issue, because that is one issue, education, that everyone cares about. So, so we're promoting, so that value in particular, how we value education, especially not the, of course not the CRT, right? Not the critical race theory stuff, is to make sure that our education value align with their value, and that's one thing that I believe Democrat is dead wrong on so many things. Almost everything about education that is not aligned with Asian Americans' values.
I think that answer, and I agree with Peter obviously on school choice and all these issues. The problem is the broader Asian community does not engage with politics. It's the same with what's going on in the Black community and the Hispanic community. Most of them are living their lives. And the thing about politics in general, Republican or Democrat, is it's too wonky. We need to start getting into the culture. We need to start getting key endorsements from important people that are influencers. So here's a great example. This year, what dominated the news? A guy named Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani, there was a little bit of an issue when Stephen A. Smith had, said a few things about Shohei being basically the new Babe Ruth. And that was an interesting controversy because I think he handled it very well, but that is exactly the stuff that people care about. Republicans love to talk up here on policy, assuming everyone cares. But the broad electorate's like, I don't know. I don't care. They're reactive. They are not thinking about these issues. They're not going, you know, especially now that we have mail-in ballots and every single person gets a ballot, they're like, oh, let me just bubble some stuff in. They're not actually thinking the level we care. Everyone in this room is like, oh my God, let's talk policy over dinner. That's the last thing your average American wants to talk about. So we need to get down on that level and start, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, for whatever you feel about him, was the last time that Republicans went to the culture and got someone to be a representative and a spokesperson and woke up people to maybe say, I don't need to vote D straight down the ticket. So these are the opportunities we need to jump on. Asian film, that's why in my org I focus so much time on, you know, God knows how many terrible movies I've had to watch, right? It's like digging through garbage to find like a diamond in the rough, but I find the good ones and I promote them because I know that if I work together with people that are actually influencing others in the community, in my community, that we have a hairball of a chance to influence them to become conservative.
Yeah, especially for the Chinese, the peoples and the immigrants, we're not familiar, we're very naive in the politicians, and most times we're issue basis, not for the policy basis. So until some issues really attract them and they get angry, and we should using this one and educating them. And just like Mark said, well, we on the table so we can talk policy. And well, I would ask questions, and how many people in here, how many each year, how many times you invited your Asian neighbors to have dinner with you? Okay, you probably say my door is open. I know somebody do. I know. I have dinner with you many times. I know, colleague. Yeah. No, I mean, you probably say my door is open. Okay, I'm very lovely to invite you coming. So I would suggest that's not enough. You should have brought them in, made them to sitting with you, because we are Asian, we're Chinese, so we are a little bit shy. So we need, until we know each other, you will see, and we are lovely people. We know what it is. And yes, education is the big issue for the Asian community. And yeah, so 2016, I went to the Supreme Court and to support and fish and to fight the Supreme Court, the fish and the West in the West Texas. I have a successor to have the ABC interview with me about why I'm there, and I also talked about a couple of the African American professor. I would say that education is education. You cannot using the racist, and it should be a remedy based, and you cannot use racist to promote this one, and you could cause the mismatch. Some people get more hurt. You need to embrace the foundation of education so everybody will succeed. And my personally, I have the education background for 30 years. I helped the Latinos, African American, reach to the Harvard and the MIT. If I can do one, I can do many. So I would say that the California education field, we need it and changing the system. Get the parents involved, let the parents choice, and promote them more and charter school. And the second issue is that recently everybody talking the CRTs. Okay, and I'm in the school board, and technically CRT is not the issue. The CRT issue is the teaching material. Right. The curriculum, and the state of California asked the education department to write a curriculum. And the Chinese community don't like it. Sikh community don't like it. Jewish community don't like it. Many communities don't think that that's right. So why we need the ego to promote the curriculum? We need to rewrite the curriculum. And I like the diversity. I think everybody will have equal to be equals. Yeah.
Can I just piggyback off that? I want to give people some hope here because Prop 16 last year was one of the most racist, obviously, propositions, and we won that by a landslide. Thanks to Christina's help up in NorCal, we engaged a lot of community leaders, and we actually didn't just have 6 weeks to run a campaign. We actually had like a whole year to message. And the message was actually a very universal one. However, we did micro-target, not in the way that was pandering, but we actually reached out to individual community leaders like Christina for the Filipino community, Jeff and a few people like Tony up in NorCal and the Chinese community. And what we did is we have to be smart as a serpent when we're fighting, because the goal is to win elections, right? So this one, we were completely idiotic in this recall election by focusing so much on the candidates on question 2 that never mattered. It was question 1 that needed to matter and focus on, right? So in that, we needed to have used a smarter strategy, like engaging the Democrats and independents that were going to vote yes, instead of giving Gavin free reign to be like, no Republican, no, it's a Republican recall, and running against that, which went back to our partisan leanings. With Prop 16, what we did is we utilized the Asian community to do the work, because Asians love to work. We're also very shy. So how we show our love language is to work. So if we give the Asians an outlet to work, guess what? They will quietly, like worker bees, get stuff done. So that's what we needed to be doing. That was completely not done in this recall campaign, where the face of the recall campaign ended up being like a white face. I'm sorry to say, Oren and et cetera, you guys should have engaged the Asian community and put up some Asian faces to make that go through and not look like the caricature that the Democrats want to paint us. This room is full of diversity. I see all kinds of races here. That is actually what the Republican coalition looks like, but it's not what our party represents outwards, because the loudest voices end up becoming the stereotype. Sorry, but Orrin Heatley looks like a stereotype, and he was the chief proponent and the face of recall. What a joke, I'm sorry to say. The party should have stepped in and put up some real faces that were from diverse communities instead of making it look like the caricature that the Democrats wanted. Soapbox off.
I'm glad that the Marc and mentioned the position 16th. Yes, we should study position 16th. Position 16th, Asian and put lots of effort, lots of fundraising in this one. But when we are celebrated the position 16th, we protected the position 209. I will say that we should. I always tell the Chinese community and also community, we need to give the credit. Number 1, we give the water colony. Water colony, and he leading us and to fighting for that. Number 1. The other things, and we also have other communities like the Caucasian others support us. Yeah. So I mean, this is a very good example. Republicans should have studied, and we're using it. Yeah. I mean the water colony is a very famous person. I mean, always remind of studying the 1960, 2000 position 209. Yeah, they're still fighting and for the Asian for the equal education rights.
So there are a couple of points that have been brought up, and I really want to talk more in depth about it. When we're talking about Prop 16, I think you hit the nail on the head with, we can't just show up before election day, right? We have to build relationships, and we need to start doing it now. So how can we develop a year-round a plan where we start building these relationships, but keeping these relationships even after the election? And what can we do as a Republican Party to have a presence year-round in these communities?
So there are events year-round, especially in Asian culture. You have your Diwali, I have my Chinese New Year. We also have many calendars events. Again, Democrats showed up to all these events by giving them a beautiful certificate and make them look good, right? So for the Asian people, especially the Chinese ones, are about face. So when you show up and give them a certificate and recognize them for being in a community, naturally, they all register as a Democrat when it comes time to choose a political party, because, oh, I remember that person. They have no idea what Democrat stands for and what their ideologies are. High taxes, but they remember that person showed up at their community event where they were given recognition. So they all register Democrats. So again, we need to fight back better. We need to fight back better by showing up and understanding their cultures, and the best person is someone from that culture to represent the party and be there. And I think there are many missed opportunities. All of you guys here in the room are the ambassador for the Republican Party. You can go out there and engage them. Hey, we're Republicans. We're here to help. And if we get that message out early, and it's not just on Christmas Eve, right? You go out there in their holidays and engage with them, and that is how we can win.
Well said, Peter. I mean, I completely agree, because on a tactical level, running a community organization and working with lots of community groups, the Republican Party is completely not present. And then the few elected officials we do have show up, like they'll show up to give that certificate, then they're scurrying out the back door. Sorry, Ling Ling, Young, and all of that, but you guys are not actually staying through and actually engaging with people and building those relationships. It's really embarrassing, okay? So that is the basic minimum is not even being met. Okay, but on top of that, let's really look at where dollars get spent. Dollars get spent in the Democratic Party really giving to a lot of these community groups. Yeah. It filters down, and I understand they have a lot more money than Republicans do, but I have seen how Republicans have spent their money, and it's just embarrassing. It goes to these consultants. I saw this in the Elder campaign. I was disgusted by all the expenses because he did raise all this money. But I wrote, if you could check out my article on Newsweek, I completely blasted just how that money was spent. It was so insulting to the community when we just keep giving all these dollars to these Republican consultants to go live lavish lives and take these lavish vacations. Meanwhile, the communities feel completely ignored. And honestly, it could just be $300 here, $500 there. Give to these different communities for a Diwali celebration, for Mooncake Festival, which we just had. Okay, or how about Asian American new organizations like 626 Night Market? Things where where the young Asian people are hanging out. Why is there no conservative presence there? Because once again, the resources and the money is being hogged by a select few elite consultant class and the embarrassing Republican.
Yeah, I'm part of the efficient ways, and we should reach to the Asian directly. And maybe they are not 100% Republican. Maybe they are not understand. We should be a friend with them, to work with them. So I was encouraging everybody and maybe have some chance to talk to me after meetings, and maybe we can have a meeting later about the appeal. I just said, 2020, we just started recommended the 8 candidates, Asian candidates to run for the jobs and position from the school board and to the Congress. And we wish for more. And for instance, when each county said we need from the 10 or 20, the Asian and the Republican, that's very easier. So, and they will have lots of party, they can include lots of people. So we have lots of common things we share. And at that time, and you guys are running for the elections, and we have volunteers. We have also have the numbers to call in the last minute. As I understand for the last recall, we did lots of effort, and I understand lots of people, even they are voting for the Trumps, and for the 2020s, they are not coming to recall for the news. And we were asking why. And yeah, so I mean, if something we did wrong, at least I know we are not to reach out to the right. So if we have all the community to do this, we have all the counties with over 50 the Republican, each county 20, each person have 10 members. We have how many people you guys figure out? Yeah, so yeah, that's what we did. So far we have almost 500 members, and we have several counties. I really wish all the counties and Asia really have a special we need to work with, and yeah, we can harvest from the Asian community for the future elections.
One point that was brought up earlier too is how the APA community is we're worker bees. We work hard at everything that we do and anything that we do. And I wanted to talk to you guys about, or get your thoughts on how we can utilize those that are engaged, using their worker bee mentality to help us mobilize, identify, register voters within their community, getting people from the community plugged into the Republican Party. So I just want to get your thoughts on how we can utilize the resources that we do have to help, mobilize and get more people involved.
It's about marketing, really, Swati. I think that there's a lot to do with marketing. So for example, I go to flea market all the time, and I buy antiques and crazy things like that. But what Democrat, again, I keep referring to the Democrats because they have done it better, and they have a lot of experience in the past 40 years of courting Asian voters. When I go to flea market, they're giving out free bags, free water bottle, with their messaging on it. And we're not doing that. It's something so simple as like Mark said, $300 of Mooncake Festival and giving out water bottles. And that gesture is something that we can do so easily, but nobody's doing it. And to my frustration, as much I want to do that, because I know I can do it, and I can make phone calls for people to pass out the water bottles, or even just the Asian hate thing was the biggest scam on Asian people ever. And yet the entire community bought into it, simply because their messaging was that stop Asian hate. It wasn't about Newsom releasing the criminals early, attacking the Asians. And so they have turned that narrative completely against us, and make us victims. So that victim mentality that Democrat has implanted on the Asian community is now deep-rooted. It's going to take a lot of effort just to turn that around, because they say, they're going to point the finger at Republicans and say, where are you guys during the Asian hate rallies? And my older generation, the Vietnamese had nothing to do with the Asian hate movement, but the entire younger generation, they all showed up at rallies. 1,000 people showed up, worker bees, passing out those water bottles. So I think the understanding is that we need to know their tactics and counter-attack with the right messaging, with the right assets. Again, I'm not talking about $50,000, I'm talking about $300 water bottle, or even plastic bags that you give out.
Swati, can you remind me of
We're talking about how the Asian community are worker bees and how can we utilize the resources that we have, so the volunteers on the ground to help us mobilize and get people, identifying voters, registering voters, and getting them to become Republicans.
Yeah, so I think in Orange County we opened up the APA Center, and I think that's a good first move, but I really like this question because it gets down to the actual tactical things of getting stuff done. A lot of the problems we have right now is because the Republicans, like Peter just said, didn't show up. There's no showing up, right? So you have a few people carrying all the weight of what needs to be done, and then simply you can't get that done on a broader scale. So I think, first of all, training staff to deal with the community is probably the first and foremost thing that's not getting done. And getting someone that can liaise between, the different Asian communities, which the Asian communities are still, because of the older generation, still siloed, though the new generation is coming together, but both are not getting reached out to. So having, a competent staff is the first and foremost thing. And what I've seen is the CA GOP and even local GOPs have enough. There's money. It's not a lot of money, but the money's getting squandered. Like I said, the consultants are sucking up that money and then not providing value in return. And that is scary. And a lot of them are actually privately leftists as well. They actually do not have our values, and yet they're taking our money. So it's so inefficient. I think that's the bigger structural problem that needs to be firstly addressed. And then we can talk about hiring competent community people that know how to liaise with different groups and then ultimately buy water bottles. But There's so much work that needs to be done first and foremost. And then also to Jeff's point earlier about running people in local office. So there's central committee, that's a great place to start. But there's also, there's also city council and school board, which obviously Asian people are all about education. And Eric's waving because he wants to represent for water board. He's on the water board. So there's so many positions, right? Get involved. Oh, you're running for city council, even better, yeah. So that's a great stepping stone to get, to grow our leadership. And there's a lack of mentorship with Republicans. Let me just tell you, there's so much selfishness of, I'm gonna fight for my turf and my fiefdom, and I'm not gonna uplift the younger person that's coming up and help them out. We need to stop that because the Democrats have a very formalized system of moving up their talent to the point that certain idiots like Dave Min is now a state senator. I'm sorry to say, but like, how the fuck did that guy get up there?
No children.
We love you, brother.
So I always tell the people, so I'm not a politician, I just want to do something by myself and changing the things and I can do. So, and I just let you guys know in Alameda County, and we joined with the Country Costa. Recently, we tried to do some things and register more young voters. And if we are going to the school to put the rules that come to register and register Republican, that's impossible. And you probably will be killed. And the teacher don't like you, the other friends or the peers don't like you. So what we did is we ask the parents to influence it and ask the students and to parking themselves. And now the people 16, they already can pre-register it. So if we are not registered now, then we probably lost them forever. If the parents can give the big influence and the peer and they can get more influence, and we may become more and young the voters for the Republican. So that's what we did, and we will give those the kids and do the good jobs and give them some kind of credit and representation and volunteer time as well. So we just want to do little by little, and also we're really concerned, and we're in the deep blue state, and in the school, and there's no hope. So we try to do it in the church, in the family, and other things. And for other things, and all the young kids in the school, they get really brainwashed. So what we did is occasionally we have parties. We talk in the personal, the parents' experience. I give them lots of story. I tell them how lucky we are in this country and what means democracy. Because I personally experienced a true communist country. I lost everything when I was young. I was in the labor camp when I was 6. No school until 12. And when I tell them, I say, it's real. That's my personal experience. I even talked to this on my community, some retired peoples, and they're crying. They said, Jeff, I really don't know you have explained that. I said, yes. That's why I'm so anti-communist. That's why I'm be a Republican, and you know my value. Okay, right? And lots of people say, Jeff, we support you, we vote for you. And I just let you guys know, and in 2022, I'm going to run for the city council as well. And in the and you know the English is my third language. It's so hard, yes, but I try my best.
I just wanted to add, our message is very important. I don't ever think we should in the state, sadly, lead off as Republican. We are, when we do our water bottles and our messaging and all of that, on our bags and everything, let's focus on the actual catchy things that attract people. And let's be leaders as Republicans on certain issues. So for example, cannabis. Okay, I'm gonna go out and say it. That is a great avenue to get to a lot of young voters that are pro-legalization, and we can get a whole swath of voters that are independents. Remember, the Democrats haven't really gained in registration since 20 years ago. They've only gone up like 2 or 3 points. most of Republicans are registering out of becoming out of Republican to be independents for a good reason, because the Republican Party does not represent. I'm an independent. Okay, I have decided to leave the party because I think it does not represent me, or nor do I like how the money is being spent. And so many here are the same way. NPP has now grown to be the second largest registration in the state. But we need to lead off with certain issues. Another one is Bitcoin. No one's talking about maybe we should nurture and be pro-Bitcoin, or at least start the conversation about it. Be a leader in starting the conversation versus being a lagging indicator and playing catch up. So the Republican Party is constantly just playing catch up instead of being in the forefront of certain issues that will get a lot of young people, including a lot of young Asians. Anyone thought about the gaming community? Have you guys seen Twitch? People sit, I cannot believe this concept, but people actually sit around and watch people play video games, and they have tournaments on how fast. Yes, and there's so much money. James Bradley there, yup, he's signaling to me, he gets it. There's so much money in there. Why don't we engage these people and inject our conservative messages? Because those people are national conservatives. Those little Asian gaming nerds, they're the future big money makers in big tech. We should be getting them before the Democrats take them.
Yeah, excellent. I remember this as it was yesterday. 10 years ago, when I was talking to my daughter, and I was talking about my stories of why I'm doing what I'm doing, and she goes like this: talk to the hand. And I go, what do you mean talk to the hand? And obviously, we're not communicating in the same language. I'm not talking about Mandarin versus English. We're not even talking the same language. Like Bitcoins and cannabis. Again, not that they smoke pot or anything. I hope they don't. But it was at that moment I realized I'm talking the wrong language to my own daughter and to my own people. So those are the messaging I think we need to work together to understand what you're talking about. Twitch, this first time I heard about it. so again, we have a lot of work to do. And I think by having this first ever Asian community engagement thing, it's really just it's the beginning of a great things to come for CAGOP.
So I actually, before we close this out, I wanna switch to the positive and what we've actually done nationally with the Republican Party. You talked about the office opening. Last cycle, I said I was the National Strategic Initiatives Director. I worked hand in hand with the Trump campaign. Through Trump Victory, we opened coalition offices for the first time in Republican history in these communities across the country. And the party is committed to engaging these communities and keeping these offices open. We kicked off the office openings with the first one here in Westminster. We're going to have another one opening soon. We're working on that right now in Young Kings District. They're opening these offices across the country. And it's something that the Republican Party, the National Party, our chairwoman, Ron McDaniel, is dedicated to making sure that we're engaging these communities because it's important. The demographics are changing, the voters are changing, and we need to be ahead of the game. I also want to say I manage the team nationally. We did over 10,000 events. We did them in 14 different languages. 8 of them were Asian languages, and I'm actually really proud to say I do also manage Nevada. Tonight there's going to be the first Tagalog training, which is a language we did not do a training in last cycle. So that will be bumped up to 15, which is really awesome. I did a training in Hindi over Zoom with members from the community all over the country and got them involved to volunteer. So things are changing. We just need to make sure that we keep engaging these communities, get them plugged in when we are having these trainings. So the office in Westminster, we have a Vietnamese staffer. She does trainings in Vietnamese. We register voters in Vietnamese. We are doing things to engage the different communities. And we're going to have these offices, like I said, all across the country. In California, we're already opened our first APA office. We're going to have another APA office and a Hispanic office as well. So keep an eye out for those. But we just have to keep doing what we're doing. And we need to show up. We need to tell these people that we have these communities community centers. We want to get them plugged in and let them know that they can feel comfortable in our party. So I guess we've got a couple questions. So
Before I take the first question, I just want to encourage Mark. It's very easy to become a Republican. See it, you'll be network. Sitting on the fence is really bad for your butt. So.
I'm not sitting on the fence, dude. Trust me, I'm not sitting on the fence.
Okay.
He was definitely not sitting on fence. Hi, I'm Roxanne. My question is, I loved almost everything you said. I'm a mama for, so not big on the pot. But there's one thing I have to say that it's sort of universal from the African American voices, and I know it'll be in the Latino voices. Orrin Heatley and Mike Netter busted their asses on the recall, and they're white, but the party should have jumped in way ahead of that parade to say, let's engage all these other people. They can't help that they're white, but they did the work, and then everybody else waited too long. Like if we had gotten involved, like if we had done community engagement from the beginning, she would have hooked him up with all
Totally.
sorts of stuff.
Isn't that the problem with the Republican Party? Like, I'm sorry, it's great, Swati, that you're saying all these things, that we're opening up these offices, but they should have been done 20 years ago.
Amen.
The party is playing catch up constantly.
And who's gonna land them?
Yeah, exactly. And then it's a management problem.
Yeah.
Correct.
So let's not go back, and let's talk
Yeah.
already. Now we have to talk about precinct operations.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
And we need to be engaging people that are second generation now. There's a different dynamic in play.
So first I want to say thank you, everyone, for participating in this panel. My name is Corinne Rennick. I'm chair of the CAGP Engagement Committee, and I titled all of these segments, community voices for a reason, because I wanted them to have a real honest dialogue. And I think I've learned a lot today, and a lot of the same things that we talked about in the Black community voices were the same things that I'm hearing from you. So there's different cultural aspects, but in a lot of ways you can swap out the word Black for Asian, for Hispanic, and it's the same. It's about the culture, and I really enjoyed what you guys said. I learned a lot today, so I really appreciate that. And I think that even though this is not a tactical training, I think that everyone who came here today is going to walk away with more information about the Asian culture and how to engage on a deeper level than when we walked in. So I just want to say thank you for that, and I appreciate your candor. Some of it was a little bit like in my face, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Corinne. I know what work Corinne did behind the scenes. She's an example of a doer, and that's why I respect you greatly. Let me just say this about the word training. I really am uncomfortable with that. When we go to the community and say, I'm going to train you, it's like saying that I'm better than you and that you're going to learn from me, when it should be a conversation. It should be. When we say, oh, we're going to do these trainings, it's kind of like, I'm going to educate you, and I really don't like that, because I feel like that's what certain people do, especially liberals. They'll be like, oh, you just need to get educated. And that is beyond condescending. And that's why a lot of people are independents, okay? It doesn't mean they're sitting on the fence, mister. It means they actually care enough about the issues that they can go beyond party lines, and they do not need to be educated. They need to be engaged in a way that is respectful and not treated like, oh, I'm going to teach you, so you're going to do what I'm going to tell you. And there is white-splaining, I'm sorry to say, okay? I wrote this op-ed called Sounds About White. Megan Rapinoe white-splaining to me what my values should be as an Asian conservative. I'm telling you, that is very real inside the GOP too. You have a lot of old power structures here that are, I'm sorry, mostly older white male. No offense to older white males. I love you guys, no issues there. But there is a contingent of we know better than you. Cut that out. There's a lot to learn, because right now we're a multicultural society, whether you like it or not, and we need to engage all groups.
And part of that is that they're stuck back in the old days, and they haven't changed anymore. And
That's right.
Democrats are 10 steps ahead of us, and we're 40 steps behind.
And they also know how to work Microsoft Excel. They also know how to work Google Suites. Okay.
So I'm actually going to have to close this out because we're coming up on our time. But I do want us to keep this dialogue going, so maybe we can go out in the hall and continue our conversation. But I want to thank you guys for being here and taking the time to attend this panel. I'm very happy that this has been very engaging, and I hope that you guys keep this conversation going outside of not just this panel or this convention, but to keep this dialogue going and start engaging the community. So, thank
I have a quick favor. Can we take next 3 minutes? This is the first inaugural Asian Community Voice. Can we have everybody come up here and take a picture with us?
Let's see if this even. Oh, cool.